So it looks like there's going to be a bit of a Barney between Jordan Peterson and Slavoj Zizek. Now, I don't mind Zizek, actually, even though he's a Marxist philosopher. He's almost unbearable to listen to talk. He's actually one of the more sane Marxist philosophers, and I find him less pretentious, ironically, than many of them. On February the 13th, he wrote this article for The Independent. Why do people find Jordan Peterson so convincing? Because the left doesn't have its own house in order. Now, the second half of this is true. The left doesn't have its own house in order, and I don't think it's capable of getting its own house in order now anyway. So when people call me right-wing, I don't really take it as an insult anymore. I think I would more take it as an insult if people would call me left-wing. If anything, I would consider myself a centrist, but then when a far lefty is calling you right-wing, that really doesn't matter, does it? It's not an indication of your position on the political compass, it's an indication of theirs. But the funny thing about this article is how empty it is of real content. So he describes Jordan Peterson in the first paragraph, and then compares him with Milo Yiannopoulos, and notes Peterson's obvious advantages over Yiannopoulos. He claims he relies on unverified theories, which is weird because everything I've seen from Jordan Peterson and read from him seems to be referencing studies that are conclusive and prove the points that they're trying to make. So honestly, I don't really see what he means by this, but he never backs up anything that he says here, so I guess I'll just carry on. Bizarrely, he brings up Jacques Lacan and starts talking about cuckoldry, and how the jealousy that is aroused from cuckoldry is pathological, which I'm sure is completely true. He then links this to the Nazis before turning it to the anti-immigrant populists of today, none of which is a criticism of Jordan Peterson. He then blames all of this on global capitalism that's being projected onto an external intruder, which I think is very generous to suggest that the Muslim immigrants coming into Europe are in fact not causing all of these social ills, and this is all somehow capitalism's fault. I'm not going to suggest... No, I am actually. It's because he's a Marxist, and they blame everything on capitalism. Because as far as a Marxist is concerned, everything that's not communism is capitalism. We finally get to him demonstrating how the left doesn't have their house in order because their reaction to anti-immigrant populism is no better, in his words. In fact, I think their reaction to anti-immigrant populism is kind of ridiculous, since they're the ones who caused anti-immigrant populism with their pro-immigrant elitism. Then he suggests that populists and PC liberals resort to the same strategies. They resort to factual lies. I think they can just be called lies. He details how both sides spread fake news, which is completely true. Continues to bemoan that this is lying in the guise of truth, which is what fake news is. And then he gets to his actual critique of Peterson, which is 2 short paragraphs. This is why Peterson's outbursts have such an effect. His crazy conspiracy theory about LGBT plus rights and #MeToo as the final offshoots of the Marxist project to destroy the West is of course ridiculous. No, it's not. And you characterizing it as the Marxist plot is actually a misrepresentation of Peterson's position that it is a neo-Marxist plot, a different school of thought that does have Marxist roots, that was crafted by French postmodernists during the 60s and then has found itself embedded in our universities. This is not a conspiracy theory, this is what has happened. In fact, no conspiracy is even necessary, because what we're looking at is not a conspiracy, it's a movement, Slavoj. I'm sure you appreciate that. This doesn't need to be a conspiracy because they do it publicly, in the open. They will write article after article. You have to understand this is so embedded in our cultures at this point. There is no conspiracy. This is just the state of the world in which we find ourselves. And you know these people get paid tens of thousands of pounds a year to do it, professionally, constantly. And you're there going, oh, this is a crazy conspiracy theory. Oh yeah, I guess Canada didn't just change their national anthem to be gender neutral. It's just a Marxist conspiracy theory. No, it's really happening. It's really having an effect. Please stop defending these people, Slavoj. Please. And then he says that Peterson is totally blind to the inner antagonisms and inconsistencies of the liberal project itself. The tension between liberals who are ready to condone racist and sexist jokes on account of the freedom of speech and the PC regulators who want to censor them as an obstacle to freedom and dignity of the victims of the jokes that has nothing to do with the authentic left. Yeah, but to be fair, that's not the reason they're doing it, is it? They're not complaining that the freedom and dignity of black people or Jews or whoever that is at the butt of a racist joke is being infringed on. They're saying that people are evil for being racist. If they did have, like, a complaint about the freedom and dignity of the victims of such jokes, I would suggest you present a victim of a joke, because I don't think there is any such thing. But this is done as a defense of what he calls the quote-unquote authentic left. And finally, he says, Peterson addresses what many of us feels goes wrong in the PC universe of obsessive regulation. The problem with him does not reside in his theories, but in the partial truths that sustain them. If the left is not able to address these limitations of its own project, it is fighting a lost battle. Well, I'm glad you understand that the left is fighting a lost battle, but I'm annoyed that you include Peterson in the tags Peterson and alt-right. He is not alt-right. The alt-right do not like him. They do not think of him as a great thinker. They think of him as a cuckservative. Because ultimately, he is a classical liberal. He knows it, we know it, you should know it. But at the end of the day, none of this is a critique of Jordan Peterson. I mean, you can't just say, well, his theories reside in partial truths. Okay, which ones? How? Show us. Make an argument. This is just a statement to say that you're opposed to Jordan Peterson. And that's fine. You can make statements saying you're opposed to Jordan Peterson, but don't suggest there's any intellectual weight to what you've put here. And so when Peterson says, with all due respect, Mr. Zizek, you really phoned this one in, I can't help but agree with him. It really looks like you have phoned this one in. And he continues with, truly I expected better, and if you have a problem with my appearance of cold scientific argumentation, just come right out and say exactly and precisely where I'm wrong, instead of generating sly and oh so lofty innuendos, which I think I have demonstrated that is exactly what Zizek did. This was slightly less flattering, as Jordan Peterson found a Twitter account called Slavoj or something, which is quotes from Zizek. Not his actual account, because apparently Zizek doesn't use social media. Now, for most of Jordan Peterson's life, social media didn't exist. Give him a break. Zizek, though, has responded to the criticisms of his article that is supposed to contain criticisms of Jordan Peterson. So he begins with the leitmotif of my critics mentioning the link between Peterson and the alt-right is that I am wrong, displaying my basic lack of acquaintance with what I criticise. Peterson is a radical liberal, and in locating him within the alt-right, I act as a politically correct and postmodern dogmatic, ignoring simple facts. Well, that's true, isn't it? Peterson is not associated with or condoned or promoted by the alt-right. So you saying that he is somehow related to the alt-right is simply wrong. He doesn't even come from a related political tradition. He says that he finds this line of attack very strange because whatever one thinks about my theories, one constant in them is my critical rejection of postmodern deconstructionism. Peterson did not call him a postmodernist. Peterson said that he phoned it in because he did. Zizek spends this paragraph complaining that now he is limited to 3 English publications that are willing to promote his work because of his criticisms of postmodernism, neo-Marxism, and intersectional social justice. I'm not surprised. Anyone will find themselves on the outside looking in if they criticise the PC dogma. Welcome to our world, Mr. Zizek. And then he gets to Peterson. He says there are 2 levels in his work. First, there is his liberal analysis and critique of PC culture, and how they pose a danger to our freedoms, and although there are things that I disagree with at this level, I also see it in some worthwhile observations. It's because most of them are really on point, aren't they? Let's be honest. He points out that people in society still have problems, which they do, and then says that he wholeheartedly disagrees with Peterson when he enters the domain of conspiracy theories. He's not in the domain of conspiracy theories. He's just talking about French intellectuals mostly that have influenced academia and various professors. I mean, I remember during Gamergate, I had a set to with, I can't remember the woman's name now, but she was an academic. She posted on her blog that yes, she does come from the Frankfurt School of Thought. It's like, well, that's not a conspiracy theory, is it? That's just someone who's part of an intellectual movement and finds themselves attracted to these ideas because I guess they serve their needs. I mean, it's not a conspiracy theory. Painting it as such is an attempt to delegitimize Peterson before even addressing what he's actually said, which seems remarkably disingenuous to me, and honestly, I would expect more from someone of Zizek's stature. For example, what he says here, what I find really problematic is he interprets political correctness and his other targets as an extreme outgrowth of cultural Marxism. I don't ever recall Jordan Peterson using the term cultural Marxism. I don't know where he's quoting from there. And I would love to know where he has actually found this. But he carries on, he seems to imply cultural Marxism is the result of a deliberate shift in Marxist or communist strategy. No, That's not at all what he's saying, and that's what you are reading, right? He doesn't see this as a grand international project that's headed up by someone in the Kremlin or something. This is a natural evolution of ideas. These ideas have just come into contact with one another, and something has synthesized from them that has turned into intersectional social justice, and that is the result of the French post-structuralist deconstructionists that you mention. Some of them are some of the people responsible for this did comprise the Frankfurt School. It's many intellectuals over many years that have got us to this point. It's not an organized conspiracy, and no, they are not simply communists. Although it is easy to dismiss many of them as such, because frankly, on an economic level, many of them are, because they don't really understand economics. And I say that as someone who has a scant knowledge of economics. It is not the old communists we are talking about. These are a new breed of intersectional neo-Marxists, and you're opposed to them as well. He's not attacking your beloved communism. At least not this time. He has attacked communism plenty, and with good reason. Let's be honest. And you might think that I'm misrepresenting Zizek's opinion here, but no, I'm really not. Listen to this. I see no necessary link between this line of thought and liberalism. The notion of cultural Marxism, manipulated by some secret communist centre and aiming to destroy Western freedoms, is pure alt-right conspiracy theory. That's not Peterson's position. And I agree, that would be a conspiracy theory, but that is a misrepresentation of what Jordan Peterson believes and what he has said. You are listening to someone else, I can only assume, or your own biases in favour of communism that you are desperately defending here, is causing you to misinterpret what Peterson actually thinks. And then he leaves us with this hot take. If I were to engage in paranoid speculations, I'd be much more inclined to say that the politically correct obsessive regulations are rather a left-liberal plot to destroy any actual radical left movement. Not even slightly, which is why all of the anarcho-communist types are all also intersectional types. This is a new philosophy that has come around in the last few decades, and we're going to have to deal with it. It's remarkably invasive. It's going to ruin traditional communism as much as it's going to ruin traditional liberalism. And no, you can't simply say Jordan Peterson is wrong, because he's not, and you haven't demonstrated how he might be. If anything, you seem to be the one talking from a previous paradigm that has now passed us by. The situation has changed. You are now outside of the group. The traditional communists are outside of the group if they are not also radical intersectional feminists and Black Lives Matter activists and whatnot. This is why you don't get the airtime you used to, because you have objected to political correctness because you can see there is a problem with it. I do hope a debate between these two gentlemen occurs, because that would definitely be something worth watching. But in the meantime, Mr. Zizek, you're wrong. And I say that as someone who rather enjoys your work.